Welcome back to Servant Leaders Library. I'm your host, Nicholas Paluco, CEO of One to One Incorporated, where we keep businesses secure, tech humming, and leaders caffeinated. Now, while I spend my days making sure servers don't crash and hackers don't party in your network, today's guest deals with a very different kind of crisis and the kind that truly tests the heart. Join me and Marti Spencer, the powerhouse and CEO, Executive Director of Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Carolinas. For over 20 years, Marti's been the calm in the storm for families facing medical emergencies, ensuring that they have a home away from home when life takes an unexpected turn. She's led through challenges, raised millions to support families in needs, and somehow still finds time to lead with grace, grit, and contagious passion that makes you believe in the good of people all over again. So grab your coffee or maybe your Happy Meal and settle in, because Marti's story is one that reminds us all what true servant leadership looks like. So Marti, wow, welcome. What an amazing organization that you're part of. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? What drew you to serve through the Ronald McDonald House Charities?
Well, thank you again, Nicholas, for having me on. I really appreciate the time. I was really introduced to the program by my own sons. They were in high
Really?
school at the time,
Okay.
and they were actually doing volunteerism here at the Ronald McDonald House. And as I don't know if everybody knows, but for us, volunteers are the backbone of what we do. We could not do it all. This is how we're able to stay lean and where we don't have high administrative costs because we have so many volunteers that come and help us out. So they said, you should come and see this place. It's really amazing. And for two boys in high school to say that, I thought, well,
Oh,
this must be
wow.
pretty impressive, right? So we
They
came
must
and
have
as a
been feeding them
family.
well, I assume.
Yes, that's my hope, right? Because that can be a crapshoot as well. So, but I came to the house and I was just like, this is really wonderful. Now they were stripping wallpaper, painting walls, cleaning up outside, doing things of that
Okay.
nature. I got involved by baking cookies, cooking a meal. We also became donors. So that's what happens for us here is that, and I experienced that, our volunteers become donors and vice versa. And so that's how I was introduced to the program. And then through doing different things, the founder of our organization, Frank Landgraf, said to me, why don't you come to work with us? And I said, well, I've got two kids in high school. I really need to watch. I'll do it part-time. So I started off as their program manager.
Okay.
And then it went from there to development and director of development, and then eventually to their CEO, where that led to a huge capital campaign to build an expansion onto the house that was built in 1989. Um, so it was about understanding that families need more than a hospital. They need a home, a place to stay. Every day, families arrive here in Greenville carrying the weight of a child in a medical crisis, or sometimes it's just ongoing care, but that can be very wearing as well on a family. And their lives are kind of turned upside down. They have to learn to navigate in different ways. And there's hospital stays, there's long drives, there's a lot of times, endless uncertainty. And so we kind of give those families that stability with everything else that's unstable to be able to stay in a place that is, where they can rest, where they can eat, they can heal together. Because we find that that's an integral part of a child's recovery and a family's recovery is being able to stay together and deal with everything together.
Wow. I was telling you earlier before we got started that I had the
Hmm.
opportunity, unfortunately, with my son who almost passed away on us, and
Mm.
and the Ronald McDonald House was a area that the hospital really promoted, and it was an amazing comfort, to your point, to bring to that. Even within the hospital, the volunteers and the food and different things that were just very welcoming. And what an amazing organization that you run. Yeah,
And
unbelievable.
I just couldn't help but be part of that. And when I got the opportunity, it was just, I'd always worked in the for business world and PR
Okay.
and marketing and that kind of thing. And I do run the Ronald McDonald House as a business. There is a difference in learning that here we don't have a product to sell, but more of a feeling and understanding. And that can come with its challengings, but I also think that it is very rewarding and exciting because you have to always be thinking outside the box.
Right. Well, that's a valid point. So you came from the for-profit arena and now into this kind of nonprofit and running it as a business. But what was like the defining aha moment where you realize, man, this probably really isn't a job. This is more of like a calling, and you kind of speak of it as a calling. Was there a moment that defined that?
I think even before I started here, when I was a volunteer, what
Mm.
called me to this was the fact that I met a family as I was doing some things in the kitchen at the Ronald McDonald House. And there was a gentleman there, and he had some bandages on him. His son had kind of a brace on him. And he had asked me, do you think they'll hold my room for me? Because I need to go to Charlotte, because I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, and this is where they were, for my daughter's funeral. And I said, well, I'm happy to check. And so then he began to explain to me, he says, well, we were coming from Atlanta. This was during the Christmas time. And he said, and we got into a terrible car accident.
Oh,
And he
wow.
said, and my daughter was catapulted through the sunroof.
Oh,
And
Lord.
my wife and my other daughter are in the hospital, but he is talking to me with a cup of coffee in his hand, being very kind and generous and just explaining everything so I will know what to ask in regard to him having his room. And I said, I'll make sure you have a room. I will, whatever you need, and that moment for me, seeing how clearly he had so much on his plate, but the calmness and the kindness that was coming from him um, was unbelievable. He had a wife and daughter in a coma, and had to go to Charlotte for the funeral of his little girl, who were all involved in this accident. But he and his son walked away.
Oh, my Lord. Wow.
So
And I'm
that for me was, if nothing else, this is where I want to be able to give back. And what does that look like? And so for me, it was part-time at first, and then understanding what the needs were for these families and putting myself in their position, walking through the front door and saying, what does this need to look like for folks when they come here? What's the comfort level? So for me, there's paperwork and all this kind of stuff that you have to do, but I always stress to my team that you need to make sure that their comfort and their needs come first, and then everything else can come in the back end.
mm.
But that was the defining moment for me.
Huh. You said many great things. One thing that you just said, kind of your team, right?
Hmm.
How do you train your team, right? Because many of them might we're human beings and we show up and we say, hey, today maybe this is my job, but it sounds like this is way more than a job, right? Like when you're interacting with these people, how do you instill that in them? How do you develop that within them? How do you hire for that?
Well, I think from the very beginning, from the onset, even when I, advertise for someone that I'm looking for a particular employee, I always put in their servant leader. That it's
Mm,
very important to have that. And I'll have people call me and go, I don't quite understand what that means, but could you explain it to me? Could you tell me what you're looking for? And so we'll go into that, but in the interview process, and even on a daily basis when they're here, it's about me touching points with them and saying, how are you doing today? What do I need to do for you today? How can I help you today? Because it's the same thing, my expectation for them of others, not only of families that are here, but of each other. So in the interview process, I will explain to them that I understand that we all have our life every day. But when you come to this job, it's very different. And when you come here, everything has to stay outside, including idle chatter, those kinds of things. There's a lot about, rumors and all this kind of things, that water cooler talk. And that I said, we have no place for that here. So if you're someone who's used to that environment, it needs to change. What we like to do here is make sure that if you're going to be speaking, it's got to be about complimenting an employee, complimenting a family, or helping the mission in some way. So it's a very different environment. And then also, like I mentioned to you, it's got to be an individual that understands that you're going to be selling a feeling and not a product. And you need to understand that the sell part of this is telling people why it matters, how do we work, and where we're going. So people know that it's not that here's $5 and I hope this helps you. Well, let me tell you why that's going to work for us, and why it matters, and then where that's going to take us. So I think those are three premises that we always have to keep in mind in this. And when I'm hiring someone, I explain all that to them
right.
to make sure. And some go, I'm just, I don't
It's
know if I
not for me.
really, right. I kind of like that camaraderie and stuff. And my offices, when I built the expansion, In 2018, we added another 17,500 square feet to the
Wow,
house.
amazing.
So when we did that, all of our offices line up with the kitchen area, and it's noisy. We have doors, but the reason being, I don't want anyone who's here working to forget why they're here.
Mm,
And you can't, because you got to walk out the door and you have to see the
see
families.
it. Mm.
So if we're on the second floor or in a different building that was connecting, we wouldn't have that connection. And it's very important because you're reminded every day why you're doing it.
Oh, I love it. I love that. That you noted like in that interview process is amazing, right? So you're kind of in the sales world, we call that you're kind of like, deselecting them before they even go through that, right? Like they have a
Right.
choice. But it's amazing how clear you set those expectations, which is amazing. Talk about like how you define servant leadership when you speak to them in the interview process.
Well, when I worked in the for-profit world, it was billable hours. It was,
Mm,
here's the client, and it's just fast and furious. You're getting people in and out the door. Here, it's not cookie cutter. So every volunteer, every donor, every family, you have to look at them as individuals. And what do they need? That's why it's not like, oh, we have a $10,000 sponsorship and this is what you get for it, and here's a 5,000.
right.
With servant leadership, it's about considering the relationship. It's not transactional. It's about relationships, and whether they're long-term or short-term. And so that is how I explain it to them. So it's very different, because in the for-profit world, many times it's all transactional. We're getting them in the door, out the door, whatever kind of business you're in. It's about the transaction and the ultimate end being that you're being paid, or, however the outcome is for you financially. And here, that's not the case for us. Because everybody we're dealing with is, you have a donor that could be a volunteer or vice versa.
Mm,
You have families that could someday come back and be donors or volunteers, like yourself. I mean, you're here, you're a person who has experienced this. And what are you doing? You're bringing someone on that had a connection to an organization that you utilized. Um, so it is a very different world, but I think a great one. And people do take advantage, let's say, and so you have to be cognizant of that,
yes.
because they want to have a big charity behind an event they're doing. Oh, so what can we do for you? And we've been there where we've been represented, and all of a sudden, here's the $10 check. But they've raised. So in the for-profit world, there's a very different conversation that would take place if something like that happened.
That have
Okay. Um, but in the nonprofit world, it has to be a very delicate and diplomatic
Mm,
conversation, but one where you can get across the fact that I hope next time you will think about us in a bigger way,
mm.
so that you can make a bigger impact on the lives of the families that you were helping.
I love that because you're kind of connected. Sounds like you're very much connecting the purpose behind
Mhm.
it, right? So,
Right,
this $1 helps X amount of people, or,
right,
this dollar helps us do, so many stays or whatever it might be. It
mhm,
creates more of an actual connection, and it's not a transaction. So I love that.
right. Hmm.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So they knew they had the right person for the job when they brought in the marketing and the communications expert, right? Like that's perfect. You're for profit, right? Didn't you
Well,
say that that was your
yes,
previous life? I was like,
that was my
wow,
previous life,
God
and
must have been calling you right into the right place there. I'll tell you.
yeah, yeah, it's not about you anymore.
That's right. I love that.
you
I
know
love that.
so, and realizing that, and of course when you have children you realize it's not about you anymore either.
You're
um
right.
so it kind of prepares you, but also knowing, I had two incredibly healthy sons, and I never had an issue or anything, and to see what these people go through, and the resilience of these kids. It's just like, I know for my boys it was a little hard at first, in the sense of I'd come home and they'd go, oh, guess what happened to me. They go, oh, really?
Yeah.
Look what's happening to these people. And I had to realize, well, your stuff is your stuff.
Right.
um but it also helped them to see, you know what it's like for other people, and that they live in what could be considered kind of a perfect world, and health and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
but it really truly isn't like that for many people. They start out right out of the gate. I have families that have been coming here 6, 7, 8 years, um, with their little ones, that are now getting to be teenagers, from something that happened to them, when they were little. They were either born with a particular affliction, they were either diagnosed with cancer, and then had to have treatments or amputations. And then, because we're right across from Shriners Hospital, and then we have a children's hospital here.
Okay.
So we do both of those entities. But so yeah, I mean, I think it's just, for me, it's just a great place to be. And I don't have to think in my mind. I really love to give back to my community, but I feel like I'm just really doing that here with the work that I'm doing.
I
And I
love
love
that.
exposing people and kids. We have a internship program here. So we
Neat.
encourage college students to come here. So, and we have a teen leadership board. And so we have teens involved in the philanthropy work
Wow,
that we
that's
do here,
cool.
so that we're
That's
hitting different
amazing.
demographics.
I love that.
And that kind of introducing them. And I have someone that leads that program, and we'll tell them that, this may not be the be all end all for you in a charity, but it's starting to open the door in philanthropy for you, so you understand. Because there are some interns that are really interested in getting into the nonprofit world, knowing the limitations, which sometimes in some nonprofits, and ours is right up there, it's not the big money that you think it is, even though there's a lot of hours, a lot of work. My particular position is a 24-hour a day job, because I can be contacted anytime, and we're open 24 hours a day as well.
It's an amazing thing. I mean, if you switch to that, right, you have this incredible team, right? And I'm sure there is, how have you kind of led through like incredible, like emotional or high stakes, events that might have come through the organization? Like, how do you keep the staff and volunteers kind of grounded in that same premise?
Well, it's daily communication. I think communication is the key. I mean, you have to communicate every day, and I'll go to them and say, I can't fix what I don't know. So when I'm coming to you and I'm asking you, hey, how's everything going or whatever, because as a person, if you see someone and they have a certain demeanor about them, I have a development director. He laughs every time. I'll go in there, and if he seems a little off, I'll go, well, I guess I'm gonna have to sit here until we figure out what's going on here,
Oh,
because
that's
I'm not.
great.
I'm not leaving, because I don't like things it's just like, I don't have a review process for the team that happens every year where we sit down and we say, okay, well, this happened and that happened. No, when it happens, it's dealt with.
Mm.
If there's a concern, it's dealt with. At the end of the year, it's about, so, what was your best thing this year? How did you feel about what you did? What are you looking to do next year? It's not about ticking off the boxes of everything that may have gone wrong or gone right during the year. It
Right.
needs to be brought to the table at the very same time.
Right away. I
Mhm.
think you really make a wonderful distinction between for-profit and nonprofit, but also then for-profit businesses that are trying to lead with servant leadership, right? Like what
Right.
I hear from you is it's about them, it's about the we, it's the greater good. It's not about me, which I think,
Right.
good or bad. Sometimes in corporate America, it's about how do I get to where I need to be, and that's a culture. But I think there's a trade-off, right? There's
Mhm.
a lot of value in serving other people. And at the end of the day, then, the gifts are given to you in many different ways. But I think it's an amazing way that you explain that, because it's a different type of culture, right? It's a
It
different
is.
type of leading that maybe others have never experienced before.
And I really think, Nicholas, that having been in the for-profit world, I really believe that there are aspects of what we do or how we manage or how I manage here in a nonprofit that can translate to make a better work environment in the for-profit.
Mm.
I do find a lot of companies that they want volunteerism. They want their groups to volunteer. So when someone comes here, it's not, here's a mop, you can mop the floor in the kitchen. It's about a presentation. When they come in the door, they have an agenda. I prepare for them, or my team will prepare for them as well. But it's about, I'm going to introduce you to who we are, because you're here today and you're going to mop this floor, but I'm going to tell you who you're mopping it for.
Yes.
So it's more about, and that's more about covering where the world they're coming from, because
Mm.
in the for-profit world, it's about, so what's my itinerary? What am I doing? What's the agenda today? So translating that into that volunteer piece, so that when they come here, it's about getting a tour, understanding who you're serving and why you're here. and then giving them a tour of the campus, and then moving on from there to the tasks that they're going to do and what that means to their families. For example, we have people I love and have done it for years here. We have cookies from the heart. So I love having cookies baking in the kitchen all the time because it smells great
Yeah.
and families love it. And so we have cookie jars all over the house,
Oh, that's neat.
and
That could
so
get dangerous.
it can, but our families will say the adults are the worst about it, not the kids so much as the adults. But so what does that mean to these families? And the families will come in and they'll thank the volunteers that are baking the cookies. And then there's toiletry bags and there's kids' activity kits that they can put together and bring. So there are a lot of aspects of that for-profit world that they can take examples from us in terms of leadership and action and that kind of thing.
I think one thing also that I took away, I'm going to write down here in a minute, that you said that really hit home for me is that you're intentionally teaching them how to speak about your mission, right? When they
Right.
leave, this is what we experience. This is how we do it. And it's not overly complicated with a PowerPoint. It's like, this is how you're living a piece, you're making an impact, but then they can easily explain that when they leave. I think
Mhm.
that in its own simple terms, we don't do enough in many of our organizations. And
Mhm.
it was an aha moment for me that in our organization, it's very difficult to marry kind of for-profit work for serving, right? Like it's trying to like put people together, but in reality, we're always kind of talking about our purpose and why we exist. But I really took away a nugget there on how to live that all the time and how to
And I think
communicate that.
sometimes we forget that our purpose, it is about surviving and taking care of ourselves and that kind of thing. But I think that our lives are better if our purpose is about others.
Yes.
And that can be translated not just from my nonprofit, but it can be put into the for-profit world because even the for-profit world, when I was head of marketing and that I would years ago, someone would call me. And then when I was younger, it was like no one wanted to know you weren't coming because the baby was sick. Okay.
Right.
I didn't have any kids at that time. And I would be like, I'm so sorry to hear you're sick because I wouldn't say out loud that it was their child that was sick because in the culture that was existing then, it was not like that. They didn't want to hear, because, I can find somebody who doesn't have any kids who's going to be here, 7 days a week. So, and making lots of money. So, I think we can translate those things into the for-profit world, making it a better work environment and making people feel that they have more of a solid ground. So again, you can make it more about not yourself, but others around you.
Right, right. I think as a child, I was always taught like, hey, don't be humble, don't brag about it. But at some levels, talking about it and why you exist, right? Like there was a period of time in my life, I'm like, well, no, you just don't talk about that. You just do your action, and actions speak louder than words. But in reality, if people don't know why you exist or what your purpose is, right,
Hmm.
you have to talk about it a little bit for them to
Right.
understand the impact or connect to that. And so, that's amazing. I think that's a really, really amazing thing. And I'm sure it just creates such a community of volunteers that kind of
Hmm.
educate each other while they're there too, which I think is really neat.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, no,
that's unbelievable.
definitely.
What would you say is some ways the community that you live in has surprised you or inspired you in supporting the mission over the years?
I'll tell you, I think, well, I mean, every day, there's so many things that, volunteers can, I mean, just before I got on, I had a group of kids that came here and, I gave them gloves and rakes and they're going to go out and, cause it's leaf season, and we do have maintenance, but for this huge campus, we got one guy and we got two housekeepers. So, but, they were coming here, but um, I think the one thing was like during COVID, I have to say, because during COVID, we didn't close.
Okay.
We were open the entire time. We furloughed no one. However, it was just myself, my director of operations, and then our 24-hour manager who was here, who sleeps on premise, maintenance, and then housekeeping that was here. Everyone else worked from home. So we did volunteer from the couch, and we did a taste of home program so we could support our local restaurants so people could get a gift certificate from there, because we didn't have people coming in and cooking a meal every night, because here there's a hot meal fixed every night.
Right.
So I think the generosity of people during that time, that they would just drive up, and then I'd have a room full of toilet paper. I'd have a room full of paper towels. I had families that were here that were saying to me, this thing of distancing and all this, and being afraid to get sick, we live with that every day because our child is compromised. And so we have to be careful, and we have to take these precautions every day. So this is nothing new for us. But if you were closed, we would not be able to come and get the care we need. So it was very important. So, and I had people come to me and say, are you getting ready to close? I mean, and I go, well, no, I still have families in the house. So, and I still had families calling. Now, maybe they didn't want me to bring the families in, but I have to say, we never had a case of COVID in the house,
Wow.
ever. And
Unbelievable.
my kids did not wear masks here within the house. And no one wore masks out in the backyard or anything like that. Like, parents were able to sit,
Oh,
but no one, and none of the staff ever got, that were working here, myself included, we never got COVID. So
unbelievable.
I think it was during that time that, as wonderful as it had been, the generosity of people to us
Mm,
at that time was just over the top.
mm.
Because they didn't have to. And as I said, we did a program called Volunteer from the Couch, which was
Love
like
that.
ordering things from Amazon, the Taste of Home program that we still have. You could do breakfast buddies, so you could, put funds into a program for that. You could adopt our pantry, so we could make sure to keep that filled. Because as I told my team, at first they were kind of like development and events and all that. They were, well, I guess we're not going to be doing anything. I go, well, if you don't do anything, we're going to lose our base. So you
Right.
still have to let people know that we're still here, we're still doing things, and we still need your help. And if you can manage it, this would be great if you could do it. We even had, we couldn't have a Christmas event like we normally do, or a big event, but we did a kind of a drive-by. So you could drive through our
Oh,
parking
neat.
lot. I had Santa in a sleigh, and we passed out cookies with tongs, and we had some cheerleaders here and things like that.
That's
But
awesome.
we thought of things that would be outdoors that we could do. And then
Right.
we flipped the switch, because we light up our house every year for Christmas. And
Oh,
so we did things to, we were creative in trying to change the narrative of all the, illness and negativity and all of that kind of stuff. And also to make it a great place for our parents to be, while they were still trying to care for their children.
that's amazing. As you lead kind of this nonprofit, right, it comes with its own version of kind of crisis management, I assume sometimes, right? From like
Oh, definitely.
funding to like emotional burnout. How do you balance the compassion with the business realities, right? Like, I mean, it's not a small organization.
No, it's not. And I think you just have to keep reminding yourself as to why you're doing it. And that is the whole thing. And you have to be, it's interesting. Someone the other day, in a conversation in a meeting I was having, because um, they're thinking of doing a nonprofit program and some trainings and stuff. And they were kind of saying to me, well, how do you do this and not feel this burnout? And I said, well, I said, I think what you have to think about is, again, getting out of your own head and realizing, okay, here's this paperwork, here's the stuff that has to be done, and it's going to get done. But the
Mm,
primary, you think about the focus of everything. For here, it's our families.
mm,
And I think that's how we navigate that. And of course, I don't have anybody like they said, well, who's your cheerleader? I have a board, but they're a volunteer board, and I don't hear from them every day. If I need something, I reach out to them, but I don't hear from them every day, because I'm the cheerleader for my team, right?
mm.
Um, but for me, it really is a higher calling. And it really is, I know I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so I have to be, in some circumstances, my own cheerleader,
Mm.
and know that
And
I'm doing it for the greater good.
I love that. So, like, you're calling your greater good, you understand the purpose and mission of the organization. And I'm sure, we don't all bat 100, but have you ever
Mm.
experienced kind of having a staff member that you just found just didn't fit those values?
Oh,
Um,
most
and,
definitely.
and
Yeah, that's
how
not a
did you
perfect
handle
thing.
that?
Well, how I handle those kind of situations, and I've had them a few times, because people get into a position and then certain things happen in their lives and they
Right.
change.
Mm,
And how they view things, how they look at things changes. So I start off, and have been successful with that, is just by going back to originally why they came to work here and saying to them, here's what you signed up for.
mm,
I'd like you to review it. Tell me what you are doing and what you're not doing or what you need. They'll come back with me, to me with
mm,
something. And then I go, okay, so this is what you think you're doing. And all right, so I'd like you to sign this. And
mm,
then we're going to come back to this in 30 days. And then when we come back to this in 30 days, if this isn't what you're doing, then I think we have to have a parting of the ways.
mm.
And
It,
so I give them the time to look over first for them to tell me, here's what you signed up for, but is this what you're doing? Or what additional duties did all of a sudden fall on you or whatever? I find people will, in within 2 to 3 weeks, it's been my experience, they'll either do that job they just signed off on
mm,
or they'll put in their resignation.
mm. And I think sometimes that's hard for a lot of leaders, but I think what you're doing is I call this, directness is kindness, right? And I mean
Right.
directness from a negative standpoint that has a negative connotation, but it's
No.
kind of like
Mm-mm.
be direct, set expectations so that other things don't happen, that we treat each other differently or we communicate differently. And I think that's really great advice. You just kind of get right down to it. You
I
set
think
the
you have to. I think
expectation,
if you just dance around a subject, it just doesn't work. And it's not serving any purpose for you as a leader. It's
right?
not serving any purpose for them because it's giving them false hope that, oh, I guess I am doing okay, or I get away with
Ah,
this.
yes.
And
Or they'll
um,
just ignore it and I won't have to deal with it anymore.
right, but it starts to infiltrate into the culture of here. I've had it. I've had toxic employees, and I've had to go and I'd say, okay, so here's what we're talking about here. And I've had ones that love, gossiping, they love to, but they're not being truthful with with this kind of thing. And I'll go to them and I'll just sit down with them right away. And I remember I mean, last year, I remember I had a meeting, sat down with my development director, and he started telling me, well, so and so said this and this and this. I go, oh, I can't even deal with that. I said, our meeting is off. I'm going to go talk to that person and set them straight. And what I did was I went into their office and say, hey, listen, we're not going to have the team meeting, but you need to help me to understand why you are saying these things, because that's what's out on the outside. Because
Mm,
I think here you're making a career decision. And, if you want to stay in this particular environment, you're going to have to change this aspect of what you're doing, and which was this kind of water cooler gossiping kind of thing with the girls, I can't have that here. There's just no,
I
there's
love
no
that.
time.
I love that it's just handled right away and it's not that there's any threats or negativity. It's just, hey, just reminding everyone this is our mission and purpose
Right.
and that is not how we are and how
And
we
it's not,
operate.
there's not any room. And if you can prove to me, and I've said this to employees before, if you can prove to me how this is benefiting our cause, I'm all about it. Let's hear it. But if not, we need to move forward. And I think that, and those kind of, that toxic environment. And I also have an HR person that is just on contract with us so that I can bounce off my ideas, because what you see is what you get. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to necessarily candy coat it. I'm going to be diplomatic, but I'm just kind of like, why are you doing this? And you can't do this anymore. So I want to give you a chance. So do you think you can come to the table with me? And that's why the situation with signing something that says, okay, this is what you're doing. And okay, so let's revisit this in 30 days.
Mhm.
And as I said, my experience has been that they either within 2 weeks it's getting done and they've changed their attitude and everything is fine, or they've put in their resignation.
Mm.
And that's not always easy, because then you have to find another
Oh,
person. But you
right.
know what? I rather fill that spot and divide and conquer, and have the right person in here, and versus not having the right person and going
Right.
through that.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes leaders, we all get stressed out because sometimes that falls to us, right? To solve
Right.
and to do, right? Because all of our organizations are not, very large all the time as you're starting a business. And so that's sometimes we kind of drag it on like, well, I'll give the directness, but I won't make the change, which hurts the culture and organization even more. I really appreciate you sharing that. It provides a lot of understanding of like, hey, this is why we exist. Have you ever felt like um, there was a scenario that you couldn't be yourself?
No. No, people know that I'm a great listen. I'll listen and, take in the information and may not respond right away, depending on the situation. Like if I need to give more thought to something.
Right.
But no, I feel like I usually have been able to respond in some form or fashion to give whoever is talking to me some solace about what the concern they may have, that I'm about you. I'm nothing but, I'm direct, but at the same time with fairness
Fair. Yeah.
and diplomacy, because I think that it doesn't take harsh words to bring your point across. I think that um, anyone can appreciate kindness. And if somebody's not kind back, I really don't care. I'm still going to give them the kindness.
Right.
Because one of the things I think is important as a leader is you have to take out the emotion. And that's where people think, well, nonprofit and for profit, being in nonprofits, it's such an emotional thing. Well, it's emotional to see the families and helping the families and that kind of thing, but it's still a business. And I think that when you take things personally or you put too much emotion and your reaction is emotional, um, versus intellectual, I think that's when you run into a problem.
When you were, developing as a leader,
Mhm.
what were kind of like one or two things that you kind of had to learn the hard way, right? Like, I mean, you have all this experience in leading now, but we have many people that are starting to become leaders, and they don't necessarily know what that means, right? Like, there's a great
Mhm.
book that's like, five, stages of leadership, right? And when we first probably get into leadership, it says, oh, well, if I tell someone what to do, that means I'm the boss, when in reality, that is not a leader. Nobody's going to
No,
follow that, right? Could you give some
right.
maybe examples of how you overcame that or developed in your
I
career?
think I think, Nicholas, the toughest thing for me was probably developing trust that someone was going to do what I'm asking
Ah,
and was going to do it in the spirit and the heart that I
ooh,
would do it.
okay.
Okay. So that was something that I challenged. I mean, I'm challenged with that, still to this day sometimes,
Yeah.
because I think people are going to do the right thing for the right reasons. And as a leader, in leading people, in working with different people, with different organizations, I have found that's not the case. And so I still am amazed and struggle with that, I'm kind of a think it, do it type of person.
Mm,
So that's not because I have people tell me all the time, wow, you got right back to me, and they're expecting days. And I don't do that. But then I struggle with, as a leader, making sure that I'm not the helicopter around my people saying, okay, I sent that to you yesterday. It's 24 hours has passed. Do I?
where's
you
it
know?
at?
So, um, so it's that part that I've had to learn with. But I think that the toughest part as a leader is trusting.
Mm. How do
Um,
you, Patrick Lencioni says the same thing, right? Like, as five dysfunctions of a team says, number one, you can't build a team without trust.
I
And
know.
so, like, what are techniques that you utilize to kind of build trust in your team, in others, maybe new hires?
I think it's just having that open conversation with them all the time. And if I think something's going on or something's not right or somebody's not feeling the right way, I just go and sit down with my coffee and just say, "Hey, so how's it going and what's happening and is everything going okay with you? Hey, and what about this thing?" And I
Mm,
kind of take and circle the conversation to where we get there. And a lot of times they may not know we're getting there, but then we do. Um, I think that's the way in which I approach it. Just
mm,
again, it's open communication. It's not being afraid to say something. And I start out my conversations a lot of times with, help me to understand why this happened like this, or this was said, or what made you feel a certain way. Um, and I have conversations like that with my our families here too sometimes because sometimes you have families and They're just, so what made you think you could take the inflatable mattress home? Right? And the phone and the remote, just kind of. So, so how's that work out? And why did you, approach a family about a new stroller when I just saw a box in your car? There's just like, and again, it's not coming to the table, not accusing, but
Right.
more in an inquiry.
Validating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. I love that. We have a lot of new leaders that we work with many times, and I see them struggle from this buddy to boss mentality, right?
Yeah, no.
There's a system called EOS. There's a book called How to Be a Great Boss, and number one says you are no longer their buddy. But it is so amazing to watch how difficult that is for someone, and we all have probably experienced that. But there
Yeah.
was an individual recently that has taken on a new title and wants to lead people, and found that the individual was not performing and had to have a tough conversation. But I think it led into like a 45-minute like pump up session,
Right.
and I don't think the person even understood what was going on. How do you coach people that are like new on your team, that you find that this is just part of their learning experience, right? Like it's not necessarily that they're not going to be a good leader, but like how do you teach them how to lead like you lead, for example, or in a similar way?
Well, first of all, I tell them that one of the key things to being a leader is being humble about your position and who you are, and going into a conversation diplomatically and kindly, and using those words no matter what comes back to you. I'll give you an example. I had an employee here that had said some things about another employee, that a group didn't want to work with them or something like that. And I went to that person and I just said, what made you say that?
Mm.
And the person just looked at me. They're young. Look, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to do that anymore. Somebody comes into you, they're saying some gossip or they're saying something. You're going to hold your hands up. You're going to, no, okay. And I said, and I want you to know that I think that you're great at what you do. And I said, and this is just a little sidetrack here, but what we're going to do from here on out is I'm over this. We're moving on. So don't think that anything's going to change here, because I've come to tell you that you can't be a gossip. You actually lied about something. I'm going to trust you to do the right thing. So let's just
Mm.
move on. So
Mm.
you give that person an opportunity. Now, if that happens again, then it's over.
Right. Like there's a defined, so you're just setting
And
the
I think they
expectations.
know,
Yeah.
and in the conversation, they know that. I'm giving you an opportunity. And I think that's what you have to do, because everybody, all of us are going to mess up. All of us are going to make mistakes. And you're just hoping that someone on the other end is going to be gracious, depending on the
Be
mistake, but
kind.
and
Right.
and kind, and is going to work with you on this, especially young or old. It doesn't matter, because we all need guidance, and everybody comes into, I have a lot of people that come in here that are new to what we're doing, and they've never done it before, and some take to it really well, and others, you've got to work with them.
Mm.
And I think, but I think that's important.
Well, we call many times in our culture, we say we want you to fail fast and win, right? But what is fail fast? And we're finding more and more we have a definition of that, but those that think failing is a negative thing, right? And I think I just heard from you
Oh yeah.
like no, like our purpose is like if we figured out what didn't work, we want to do that quickly, and then we want to pivot, we want to adjust, right?
Hmm.
And what is astounding to me is we're seeing many more people that is a negative. Like I have
Yeah.
failed to do what I need to do, but I don't know about you. However, like failing is like education,
It's
right?
growth.
The
It's
failing,
absolutely
right?
growth.
It's growth. The faster that I can fail, but it feels uncomfortable because now my it could be my identity or I look bad. But I think till that person figures out, like you noted earlier, right? Like when you have children, it's not about me anymore. It's about the greater good. And so I find that very interesting. And
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 I think if people own it, and that's
right.
the whole thing. If they own it and just realize, okay, yeah, I messed up or whatever, and they own that failure. I mean, I had someone on my own staff a few weeks ago that said, I don't fail. And I go, well, that's sad. I said, because
Right.
how do you learn if you don't fail? I'm not expecting perfection here. So this isn't about failure. This is about, let's just look at what happened and let's just move on. But I said, so you didn't get it right this time, you'll get it right the next time. But
Yeah.
don't think you can't fail. And so a lot of times, and I actually said to them, to me, it sounds like you came from someplace in your life that it was never good enough. And I said, it's always good enough here.
Mm.
And that person was brought to tears over that comment because they said, how would you know that? And I go, because if you feel like you're just, because you do something wrong, you're a failure and that's a terrible thing. I said, I'm giving you the grace to know that that's not
Mm.
how it works here. And it shouldn't work that way in life either. You
Right.
know, so we should be allowed to fail. There should be failure. And I think new leaders and young people that are coming up should know that there is humility in leading, but there's also great responsibility in leading. And I think you have to be able to give people the grace to fail and let them know it's okay.
Right. Yeah. To support them in that. Uh,
And when you were talking about whether, relationships, I will tell you, I always tell my team, and even with the families that are here, because we have to be careful of relationships and that kind of thing, you can be friendly, but not familiar.
right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
that's the distinction for me is
Mm.
I'm friendly. I do anything for anybody, but I'm not familiar.
Mm.
So,
I like that. That's a great note.
we're not going to my house for dinner because I'm not doing you any favors, okay?
Right.
Not because I'm not a good cook, great cook, okay? But I'm not doing you any favors. Because I think there has to be that line so there is objectivity.
Right.
And
Wait,
where other people, your other team members, don't think that there is favor with one
favoritism.
that with
Yes.
another. Hmm.
That's well said. And you talked about earlier, right? I mean, a big portion of your role is, and I think you've secured millions of dollars and you've expanded the organization, right? What strategies have been most effective, like in building trust with the donors and partners? You said a little bit about that earlier, but I'm sure there is a trust factor in allowing them to come into your world and to effectively choose the right donors and partners.
Well, what I like to do every year is that we put together an impact study, and that impact
Mm,
study covers how many people have we affected this year.
mm,
How many volunteers have we had? It touches on
mm,
different things that
mhm,
we have done that are for our organization. How much money have we saved our families? Because isn't that why you're donating? Because we are helping families. So, like last year, our impact study showed that we had saved our families in meals and lodging and transportation $1.4 million.
wow.
Okay, and this is how many volunteers we had. So I think that that is a really, and we do it mid-year as well, so that we can show what your dollars are doing. I'm not taking for granted that you just gave me a check for $5,000. And I'm also always sending out thank yous, whether it's an email, a handwritten note, touching base with them to let them know how I feel about it. Um, I have a donor that is just really wonderful, and his grandfather, who was part of this big foundation that he has, passed away, and it really devastated this young man. And I made note of that a year out, that on the anniversary, I was going to reach out to him
Mm,
about the passing of his grandfather and about how this had affected him. And that when we are affected that way with grief, it's because of the legacy that they've left to us, you know and then what he's done for our families. So I think it's keeping all those things in mind. And as a business person, when I was in for profit, that's one of the things I used to follow my clients and be sure that I was on top of things and helping them to feel that, even though it was a business and we were doing things for them, um, how that was all working out. And so I've translated that to the nonprofit world, but even more so. And the messages in a different way because I want them to know what they're doing. So I think just letting them know that is how I kind of keep in touch with them and keep
mm,
that donor. And also understanding that it's not cookie cutter. So one donor may want a particular thing. So it's not that, well, I need for you to do this. What would you like to do?
mm,
What's going to fulfill your heart? You
mm.
know?
Uh,
And so that's how we work it.
oh, I like that. What advice would you give leaders trying to really rally a team such as yourself? It seems like you really rally your team around the cause, and but has an operational demand, right? But
Mhm.
they're trying to be leaders, trying to rally a team around their cause that might be deeply emotional to them, but also operationally demanding. Like what advice would you give a new leader trying to do that?
Again, I think it's that, and that's what makes it, that's the challenge in itself, is the fact that you really have to be on point all the time. If you're going to be a leader and you're going to be an effective leader, you are going to be having to think about this and your people every day. All day, you're going to have to check on them. You're going to see how they're doing. It's not about hand holding. It's
Mm-hmm.
about, it's about solidifying the base of your organization. So if you're just assuming everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, and you're just assuming everybody's feeling good and you don't have to get together, that's not the case. I mean, from families to volunteers, my director of operations, she's got a big team because she's got several people that do shift work here. Like I said, we're 24 hours a day here. So what does that look like? How is she feeling? Is she feeling overwhelmed? Um, are they feeling overwhelmed? So I think it's just checking on your team all the time. And I mean, I have probably 14 team members here that are full-time, part-time.
Okay.
And I have a director of development. I have a communications manager. I
Mm,
have a brand strategist that is a consultant.
okay.
So, and then I have a corporate engagement advisor that's also a consultant. And I have those pieces, that used to be one employee,
Wow.
but I've had some turnover with that position. And so I've decided I'm going to kind of divide and conquer at the moment and see if
That's
that
great.
works. Because this is exactly the specialization that this particular person does in philanthropy. And then this particular person is a storyteller and a strategist for brands. So I think I'll get more juice out of doing that than having one full-time employee here that is, focused on the day to day. But these folks, when you're a contractor, it's just a lot, it's very different.
Mm. I love that. When you think about switching to you a little bit here, when you think about your legacy at the Ronald
Hmm.
McDonald House,
Hmm.
what do you hope people will say about your leadership?
That it was fair and loving.
Mm, that was well said. Well said. Um, and how is it kind of, how has this work changed you? I know you talked a lot about that earlier, not just as a leader, but like as a person. Like, what would you say, like the biggest thing that's impacted you as you led this organization?
Um, there's like so many things, but for me, how it's impacted me is just showing me how grateful. I
Mm.
find myself feeling guilty about certain things I might get upset about in regular life, and then I reel back here,
Right,
and then, my husband and my family will say to me, but that's okay. you know,
right,
because you know, I might feel guilty about something, I don't know, like a pain or something, and I'm like, or I'm limping
right.
or the back or something. I don't know. I think that's the biggest thing, is that I don't how it's impacted me is I don't give myself a break. I don't I I do have this sense of, I just see everything that goes on here, and I'm like, how could you even? Well, not only here, but in the world, how can you even complain? So I think
Right.
that's probably my thing. I forget that we all have our stuff.
Well, that is true, right? Like I went through experience with that at one point, and I went to actually my pastor and I said, "Hey, it just feels wrong, right? Like I have these opportunities and others don't." And he looked at me and he said, "Listen, he goes, God gave you this talent. It depends on how you want to utilize this talent. So if it is that you have made money doing what you're doing, it's what are you doing with the money that you've been given through your talent?" And I was like, "Okay, all right. So don't stop doing it, but just how do you utilize it?" So I was smirking when you were saying that, kind of bringing that talk that I had back then.
Yeah, because my prayer every day is that whoever sees me sees him.
Oh,
And so because of that, um, yeah, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm not feeling like, oh, woe is me today or whatever, whenever you have a
yeah.
bad day. Um, and that I've made the choice to do this. And that is what life is about. We have choices. And some people, that feeling that you get inside you, that I feel that that's a grace, and that's a grace to say, I've always gone with that. And I just feel that tells me the direction to go in. And that direction, and we all have it. It's just some of us listen to it and some of us don't. Some of us think we know better.
Mm.
And I know we have this free will. I give it up. I'm just like, you know best.
It
So
seems magical things seem to happen when we do that, doesn't it?
it's true. And so I just, like I said, I just feel that um, I've been able to have that time in this position to recognize that this is not about me in this world. It is about leading and helping and giving to others. And I don't think it's just nonprofit that benefits from that thought process. I think for profit can benefit for that
I would
thought
100% agree
process.
to that.
You
If
know,
you get, if you, as you know, if you could give yourself, if you could go back, right, and give advice to yourself when you had your first leadership role, what would you say to yourself?
oh, I probably would have just definitely gone into nonprofit.
You just right
I
into nonprofit.
I think my heart was probably there. I just didn't recognize it. It hadn't been developed. It was all about corporate. It was all about making the money. I was in Miami. Now I live in a smaller town here. I've been here like 20 something years, but I lived in Miami. I grew up in a little place called Coral Gables in Miami, Florida, and it was PR and marketing then and doing events that were worth, $1 million. But and now I do events that I hope look like it, but I'm only doing it for 10.
Yeah.
So, but I think my younger self, I would have said you need to go into something that speaks more to your heart, because I know in the for-profit, I always felt, and mind you, this was like in the 70s and 80s, okay? So it was just a different world. Um, there was no work-life balance. There was nothing like that. And we didn't have computers then like we do now, but it was more like you were always on the phone, you were always connected, you were always running. Um, just running and gunning all the time. And there wasn't time to really develop who you were. You were just, it was so fast paced. So I think I would have just taken it back a little bit and gone in the nonprofit direction and worked to do that. I think that would have given me a lot more satisfaction
Hmm.
um, in my work environment.
Love it. So finally, kind of as we work to wrap up today, in true servant leader library fashion, who served you through your leadership, or who inspired you to become who you are today?
I would have to say that was my father
Mm,
and my grandmother. My mother was in the picture, but we were a family of five, so she was taking care of all the five.
uh,
So, but my grandmother was a very strong woman, my father's mother, and so it's the women in my life and my aunts. I had an aunt that was a nun during World War II, and she was
okay.
in um, the islands in the Mariana Islands, taken over by the Japanese. Her survival there. My grandmother was a single mother. She was head of the Florida Nurses Association. She was a
Wow.
powerhouse, raising two kids on her own. Got a master's in the 30s, which was unheard of for a woman.
Wow.
And then my other grandmother, because I speak Spanish fluently because my mother is from Bogota, Colombia,
Oh,
and so I grew up speaking both languages. And so my grandmother in South America was a first radio personality in Bogota, Colombia. And that was
really?
very unheard of in the 1940s for a woman in a Latin culture to be,
Wow.
showcased. So I think it's those strong women in my life that I've always looked at and their sacrifices and the things that they did in their lives. And then my dad, it was just to have that male perspective. And I had three brothers, and so that was very helpful as well. But to have that male perspective was really huge for me in my life.
Hmm.
And that was the part of don't take yourself too seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
There, you just reminded me of something. There was a speaker that I was a part of, and she is currently a Catholic nun, but her mission originally was that she went into the army to get educated because she was part of a large family and became a surgeon. She then became a practicing physician outside a surgeon, and then realized that her calling was to serve others through being a sister. And she came to speak to us about her purpose and mission. And when I hear you speak, it's very passionate about that as well. Her whole purpose and driving force is about serving others. And it was amazing to hear her leadership through all of those mechanisms, right? About
Hmm.
talking about war and her struggles as a female through that process as well. But still
Hmm.
today, she runs these nonprofits to help others and do surgeries and to save lives. And she wrote a book. Somebody wrote a book for about her because she would not write the book on her own, and that woman was there to talk about this amazing woman. So that brought a memory up. So sorry to kind of
No, no,
move
I
you a
think
different
that's
direction.
wonderful. But yeah, they are the ones. And then of course your kids, they grow up. I had a son that served in the military,
Wow.
and my father and brothers were in the military, FBI, naval
Wow.
intelligence, and then my own son right now, he has a film company and he makes movies about veterans, tells their stories.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
yeah, so he has 3 movies out on Amazon right now. So he
That's amazing.
yeah, and it's about telling their stories and letting people know what they've gone through and what they've sacrificed. And again, it's about giving back to people that otherwise wouldn't have a voice.
Oh,
So
I
yeah,
love it. What a
yeah,
beautiful family. Beautiful family. I have one last question for you.
sure.
Okay. And you might answer this one already, but what's one thing people would be surprised to learn about you outside of work?
That I'm part of this film company.
Oh, wow. All right. I wouldn't have
That I'm
called
part of
that.
this
That
film
was great.
company, that I'm a partner in that, and that I speak Spanish fluently because you wouldn't think she would.
I love it. I love it. It seems like you're bringing your talents alive everywhere. What an amazing, amazing time we've had today. I appreciate you
Well,
being
thank
here.
you, Nicholas. I really appreciate you taking the time and reaching out and giving me the opportunity to say a few words about Ronald McDonald House and to also just inspire others, to build that bridge and take care of people today. And there's so much that needs to be done out there to expand and to help families, which is what we're all about. And and just to listen to that grace inside you.
Yes, well said, well said. Well, Marty, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your story, your wisdom, and for reminding us that servant leadership isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about
Uh,
showing up, heart first, when people need it most. You've
yeah.
given us a beautiful reminder that leadership can be both strategic and deeply human, and that sometimes the greatest ROI is a family peace of mind. To everyone listening, if this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you want to run out and volunteer, go do it. And while you're there, click the follow button and don't miss more stories about incredible leaders like Marty who are
Mm.
there changing the world one act of service at a time. So until next time, keep leading with purpose, keep serving with heart, and remember, even a leader, a little bit of cheeky never hurts.